I think that writing chords can be one of the most daunting aspects when it comes to creating a new song. So I wanted to make this video to talk about my process when I'm coming up with chord progressions for my tracks. I'll take you through the process of writing a new chord progression, talk about some of the things that I think about when I'm writing those chords, as well as a couple of tips of things that you can think about when coming up with chords for your songs. So let's jump into FL Studio and come up with a chord progression. Let's jump into it. When I'm writing chord progressions, there's a couple of things that I can do to start, and the first thing is generally just find any chord, any old chord that I like the sound of. At the moment, I've really been writing a lot of my music in a D major scale or a D sharp major scale. So let's start there. So let's just build a D major triad, and if you don't know any music theory at all, you want to build a major triad. You place your root note, which is the D in this case, then you skip 3 notes or 3 semitones, then you place your third note, which is that F sharp, then you skip 2 more to place your A. And if you wanted to carry on in this pattern, then going 3 again, you'd have a 7th chord, 2 again, you'd have a 9th chord, 11th chord, 13th chord, and so on. What I tend to do mostly is just to double up that root note to give you a really kind of solid foundation. So this is how our chord sounds. Now that's a nice chord. I don't know if I really love it, but let's use it just as a good starting point. Now we know we're working in a D major scale here, so what you can actually do in FL Studio, you come up here, you can get a stamp of the D major scale. So if you click on the stamp button and then go down to your melodic scales section and click major Ionian, that's the general standard. And if you just click in a D, FL Studio is going to give you all of the notes in your D major scale, and you can use this to create chords. So I know I've got the 1 for my scale here, so I'm probably going to go maybe up to the 6, get that B, and what I might do is drop it down an octave here as well. So we've got our B, and then this is going to be a B minor because we're starting with 2 steps, and then but the problem here is if I put in my chord like that, it's incredibly similar to my D chord and they're not going to sound different enough. It's only that root note that's changed. So I'll push that A up to a B because then we've got a slight difference in our chords. And then I could also push this D up to match that top D for our other chord. Let's take a listen to see how that sounds. And that's much nicer, and we've got some real difference there in our chords. Now what you can do at this point is you can carry on. You see we're going from a D to a B, so let's bring our stamp back in and let's try and find another chord. So we could move down there to an A potentially if we want to carry on in this downwards trajectory. Now we know we're putting in an A major chord. Now none of these notes have been used yet, and what we could do is create an A chord that looks something like that. We've got an A major triad here, and then we've doubled up the 1st and the 3rd. So let's see how that sounds with our B chord. And that sounds pretty nice actually, that's not sounding too bad. What you could also do then, just to finish off, is go back to our B chord. But I'm not sure about going back to the B chord. What I might do is drop down to a G. We know that a G major is a G, B and D, which are notes that I've used previously, so we know they're going to sit quite nicely. And then I might just go G, skip the 3rd, go to the 5th, and then raise our 3rd up 1 octave, then back to the D. And now we have a pretty nice chord progression. Now this is a major scale, so it generally sounds more uplifting. And it's fairly simple. We haven't done anything really crazy here. There's nothing super complex about these chords, but it's sounding pretty nice. So this is how it all sounds together as it currently stands. That might work for maybe a sleepy or something more emotional, maybe a nostalgic type beat. If you wanted to, let's say, make a really kind of classic, dusty, lo-fi jazzy type of beat, you might drop these to be 7th or up these to be 9th chords. So let's see how that sounds. If we make that one a 7th chord, let's do the same with our B and do the same with this here, just by dropping down so we get that 3, 2, 3 pattern. And that's always going to be the 7th chord. And then let's do the same with our G as well. So we've got 3, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, skip that. That's going to be our 7th chord. And I'm going to raise that B back up so that it's nice and full sounding. So if you wanted to go for something a little bit more jazzy, perhaps this is one way that you could think about writing your chords. And for that, we've still used exactly the same chords, exactly the same roots of those chords. We've simply just dropped the raised octave root notes to be the 7th note in those chords. I'm going to switch it back, so it's not really my vibe, but it's definitely something worth thinking about. Now I've got my chords back to where I want them. There's a few more tweaks that you can make from this point. Currently just got these chords playing one chord on every bar of this 4-bar loop, but you could absolutely change it up. So you could go 2, and then you could play that one to be longer. This would give you a lot more space for adding in other elements to the track. As those elongated chords ring out, you've just got tons of space. That's a really common chord structure that you might hear in a lo-fi track. Another one that you might hear is just to shorten that first chord even further and then bring these back in. Much shorter pattern. And then you could play that through again to finish out your 4 bars. There's lots you can do in terms of structuring your tracks. One type of chord structure that I like to use quite a lot in my tracks is this simple one, and that just gives you quite a lot of space to play with the other melodic elements. And we know that I love to layer different elements together to create a really nice picture, a really nice story in my tracks. So at this point you could absolutely leave it here. Something that I've been playing with a lot recently is using suspended and diminished chords. So at the moment we've just used our really simple D major triad, and then the same here with a B minor. And what I think I might do is actually raise that up, so we're no longer playing the 1, the 3 and the 5. You'll see that we're now playing the 1, the 4 and the 5. And I just think that sounds super lovely, and I might actually raise that G in the B to match it. Once you get your basic chord pattern, once you get your basic chord structure down, you can then just start playing around with the notes, seeing what you like the sound of, what you don't like the sound of, and what works together. So because this has this kind of suspended feeling, I actually dropped that D back down, but I'm not sure if that's what I want to do. I might just add the D in there and then possibly that A in there. Let's see how that sounds. Yeah, see, it's too similar. And then potentially we've got all of this row of Ds here. We could move that up to be a suspended chord again. Now, another thing that's worth thinking about with your chords is the velocities and the strumming patterns. Now on FL Studio, there's a really nice shortcut to help with these things. So if you highlight all of your chords, everything in the piano roll, you hit Alt and R, you can bring up this randomizer and you can tweak these. If you look at the velocities down the bottom, you can tweak these knobs to actually tweak the velocities up or down. It gives your chords a more human feeling. And then if you use Alt and X, you can bring up this leveler as well, and you can move everything up and down, and it will sort of keep the structure of those velocities. And I kind of want to soften the sound of this piano, so I'm just going to move it down slightly. That's really nice. Feels a lot warmer than the high velocity of those upper notes. And that's another thing to think about, is that higher notes in your chords are going to be a lot harsher than the other notes. So if I highlight the top notes, hit Alt and X, I can make sure that they're a little bit more subtle than the lower notes. And then finally, one last thing to think about is the strum of your notes. We highlight all of our notes in the piano roll and we hit Alt S. That gives us a strummizer. And if you just tweak this time knob, you'll see that it will strum our notes. If we turn it all the way up, it's a little too much. But if we just make it kind of subtle, you get this feeling of someone playing the piano. Not all of the notes hitting at exactly the same time. And just like that, we have a really lovely, really basic chord progression that we could go ahead and start a track with. And there we go. That's generally how I think about the process while I'm writing chords for my track. This is a really simple explanation of that, but generally a couple of things that you really need to think about are what scale you're working in, thinking about how the chords play well together, and then also think about extending your chords into ninth chords, seventh chords, and learn about suspending, diminishing chords. That can give you a really unique texture and sound. And then finally, think about your velocities, think about how harsh you want your pianos to sound, and also think about the strum of your chords. Now, I did this on the piano, but all of the same logic can be used when playing a guitar. So yeah, I think that's about it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and tune in next week.